Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another watch party with me, your host, Goldie Gamari, as well as several other Iranians in the chat. Want to give a shout out to our mods and our members who are joining us to watch this live stream, or if you're watching it afterwards, hi to you all. So today I was actually going to do a live stream about life in Iran before the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And it was a very fun, sort of lighthearted documentary. Um, but then I realized that today, November 4, is the anniversary of the day that the Islamic Republic took American diplomats hostage for 444 days. And I wanted to share a few videos with you, some from today, some from before. And then we're going to go in and we're going to dive into this documentary about the Iranian hostage crisis, or as I like to refer to it, the Islamic Republic hostage crisis, because it was the Islamic Republic that took Americans hostage, not Iran. I'm Iranian. The flag behind me is the real flag of Iran. That's the Iran that was allies with the United States. It was only when the Islamic Republic took Iran hostage in 1979, and it was only when the Islamic Republic imposed their Islamofascist jihadi ideology on Iran, it was then that they actually took Americans hostage, because prior to that, Iran and the United States were close allies. And once Iran is free, we will go back to being close allies once again, because this Islamic jihadi ideology is the enemy of both Iranians and the Iranians and the United States. So this jihadi Islamofascist ideology is the enemy of both Iranians and the United States. I want to start off with this video here that you can see on your screen. So this is actually a video of U.S. diplomats. I'm just going to make this bigger here so you guys can actually see it. So this is a video of U.S. diplomats, and they were attending a Friday prayer in Iran. This is occupied Iran. So this is just when the Islamic Republic had occupied Iran. And you can see these American diplomats. They're obviously not Muslim, and yet here they are inside of a mosque. They are, fake praying. They're like pretending to play, to pray. And they're doing so because they're hoping that they're able to appease the Islamists, that they're able to appease the Islamic Republic. And yet, 9 days later, after they attend this mosque to pretend to pray to, the Islamic God Allah, they are taken hostage by the same people who are attending this mosque. So let's watch this video from 1979, where American diplomats are bending the knee to Islamists, right? Let's watch it. Like, you can see this guy here, obviously he has no idea what to do. Like none of these Americans are Muslim, right? So I don't know what the hell they're doing in a mosque anyway, but they're there to appease the Islamists, right? Like right? Like they're not. Right? Did you see that? Did you see that? Wait, let me minimize this screen here. How do I minimize this? Let's see. How do I do this? There we go. So did you see how these American diplomats are literally bending the knee to Islamic terrorists? They're going to their mosque. They're fake praying, while Allah Akbar is going off in the background. And then literally 9 days later, on November 4, 1979, these same American diplomats are taken hostage by the Islamists at this mosque, right? The ones they were trying to appease. So let this be a lesson to you guys. You know, you cannot negotiate with Islamic terrorists, no matter how much you try. You know, here they are, literally, 1979 Iran, occupied Iran, right? This is just after the Islamic coup d'état, and the American diplomats are thinking, okay, like, you know, we're gonna go to their mosque, we're gonna, like, you know, pretend to pray to Allah, whatever, and they'll leave us alone. False, because you give them an inch, they take a mile. And to me, I find it incredibly concerning that there are so many Western politicians today who are literally going to mosques to pretend to pray because they think that doing so is like a sign of, I don't know, friendship. No, when you do that, when you pretend to pray, they basically see it as a sign of submission. So, you know, take a lesson from history because history usually repeats itself. Let's watch this again now that you can see this. So these are American diplomats, clueless American diplomats who are going to a mosque. They are pretend praying because they want to try and appease the terrorist Islamic Republic. And 9 days after they go to this mosque and pretend pray, they are taken hostage by the same people in this mosque. Here they are. No idea what they're doing. Completely clueless. Right? There you go. Bowing down and submitting to their God, right? They're bowing down and submitting to their God, Allah. But that wasn't good enough. That was not good enough for the Islamic terrorists. The Islamic terrorists instead saw that as a sign of weakness and said, you know what, we're going to make an example of these American diplomats. And then not only was it good enough for the Islamic terrorists to take my country of Iran hostage and to take, you know, 80 million Iranians hostage, they also had to take Americans hostage. And the Americans, I mean, they handed themselves to the Islamists on a not even a silver platter, on a gold platter, right? By going to their mosque and bowing down and, you know, fake praying to Allah, they were basically saying, yeah, take us. We're weak, right? Um, and not only that, so that's a video from 1979. But let's look at what the Islamic Republic is doing today, guys. So, you know, this is the Islamic Republic. So they held this like weird jihadi parade here. Of course, this is attended only by people who support the Islamic Republic. So as you can see, you know, these videos, which is broadcast by Islamic regime state TV, they don't actually pan out. They don't actually zoom out to show the crowd because there's hardly anyone attending these parades, right? Like Tehran has a population of 30 million people. Um, they would be lucky if maybe 10,000 people showed up. And of those 10,000, I would say at least 70% of them are people who work for the Islamic Republic themselves, plus, you know, their women and children. And then the other 30% would be people that they bust in from rural areas, you know, poor villages and farms. And they basically give them lunch, you know, in return for them coming to attend these so-called, you know, jihadi parades, right? So I mean, look at what they're doing here. Like they're literally dressing up like President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, okay? And this, you know, like this is how like evil and demonic and sick the Islamic Republic is. This is how like mental these people. I just want to say this like this is how messed up their jihadi ideology is. These people are literally celebrating the day that they took Americans hostage, right? I mean, you have to be really sick in the head to celebrate that. Like you're not a normal person. You're literally a 7th century Islamic inbred savage, right? Because who the hell celebrates hostage taking? Oh, wait, I know who celebrates hostage taking. The Palestinians, right? Hamas and the Palestinians and the Gazans, they also celebrate hostage taking. Where do you think the Palestinians learned this behavior from? They learned it from, you know, their big daddy, the Islamic Republic. So I mean, all these Islamic terrorists, they operate the same, they have the same, MO, they have the same behavior, so that the fake Palestinians and their fake Palestinian cause, they all get it from the Islamic Republic. So let's now watch this weird Islamic jihadi parade that happened in occupied Iran, funded by the Islamic Republic. Oh, and by the way, right, like, so they're making fun of President Trump here, and of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu. And then, these are the people, like these are the jihadis that Tucker Carlson wants you to believe, are not your enemy, right? Like Tucker Carlson literally says that, the Islamic Republic is not your enemy, but Israel is. So, I mean, pay attention to all of these, like, weird people in the West who are actively supporting the Islamic Republic, because there is no good reason to support the Islamic Republic ever, unless you're getting paid by them, right? I can see I'm triggering a lot of people in the chat, so I'm glad that you guys are being triggered, because the facts don't really care about your feelings. So you can continue to be triggered. Here, let me pull up the other video while I'm at it so I can continue triggering the Islamic terrorists in the chat. So again, here's another video. So this is the Islamic Republic, and right, like they're holding like some weird jihadi, like um Islamic like court or something, and they're basically like trying, like they're like pretending to like try President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu for like war crimes, which is actually like completely messed up, because it's the Islamic Republic that are responsible for war crimes. But like here's like this other like weird jihadi Islamic play that the Islamic Republic orchestrated today in honor of the American hostage taking, right? So
متهمین پرونده چطور؟ شما دفاعیه‌ای دارید؟ آقای نتانیاهو، آقای ترامپ، شما چطور؟
There you can see, so that's supposed to be President Trump. He's, oh, look, President Trump is in handcuffs there, right? So I mean, there you go. Like these are the weird, like Islamic jihadi, like savages that Tucker Carlson wants you to think are not your enemies, right? Like they're literally holding like weird Islamic jihadi plays, where they're putting President Trump on trial. I don't know what, because the Islamic Republic are the war criminals. But yeah, it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder. So again, today is the anniversary of the uh, you know, hostage crisis. Now, a lot of people refer to it as the Iran hostage crisis. As an Iranian, I refer to it as the Islamic Republic hostage crisis, because prior to 1979, prior to the Islamic occupation of Iran, prior to the imposition of Sharia law, and their backwards 7th century Islamic ideology, Iran, which was a normal secular country, was actually one of the strongest allies of the United States at the time. It was only when Sharia law came and took Iran hostage that they started yelling "Death to America, death to Israel." So a little bit of input and insight into the real culprit here, because the real culprit is not Iran or Iranians. The real culprit is that jihadi Islamic ideology that has taken Iran hostage. So with that, we're going to move to the documentary that we're going to watch today. It's called 444 Days, the Iran Hostage Crisis. It is fully available on YouTube. So yeah, It says here, so this documentary has almost 60,000 views on this channel. Um, Someone in the chat is saying, is the Islamic Republic the only war criminal? 100% the Islamic Republic is the only war criminal. The United States and Israel are not war criminals. Take your jihadi Islamic propaganda somewhere else. It is not welcome on this channel. This is a pro-Iran channel. This is a pro-USA channel. This is a pro-Israel channel. This is a pro-Zionist channel. We do not tolerate fake Palestine or, Islamofascist jihadi nonsense. So this documentary, okay, it was a 444-day ordeal for the U.S. diplomats held hostage from November 4, 1979 to January 20, 1981. All right, guys, we are going to start watching this documentary, and I will provide my thoughts and feedback as we go. The one thing I want to point out is that it is always frustrating for me when these documentaries say Iran and not the Islamic Republic, because when they say Iran, they're actually not properly identifying the source of terrorism. The source of terrorism is not Iran. The source of terrorism is the Islamic Republic. The source of terrorism is Sharia law. And the source of terrorism is their 7th century Islamic ideology that occupied Iran in 1979, has been holding Iranian people hostage, has been murdering Iranian people every day in the name of Allah and Muhammad and Islam. And then they started attacking Americans as well. So that would be my one major criticism so far, because when non-Iranians don't understand that difference and distinction between the Islamic Republic and Iran, they will assume that the enemy is Iranians. No, the enemy is not Iranians. The enemy, again, is the Islamic Republic. And if you look at my other documentaries, other watch parties, I've shown numerous times, that Iran and the United States were very, very close allies. In fact, Richard Nixon was a very, very good friend of the Shah of Iran at the time. And it was Jimmy Carter, the idiotic Democrat, who backed the Ayatollah, right? So it was Jimmy Carter who supported the Islamists, and then the Islamists took power and started yelling death to America. For some reason, Democrats in America have always supported Islamic terrorists. I don't know why. Seems like some sort of weird fetish or mental illness. No clue. But let's begin watching this documentary now. So I would say right now, I'm at a 7 out of 10 without having seen anything, only because they call it the Iran hostage crisis. And so then, that naturally makes people think that, it's us Iranians, but it wasn't us. The enemy is the Islamic Republic. So, and by the way, many of the university students who were involved in the hostage crisis in 1979 are now, unfortunately, part of the Islamic Republic leadership, right? So they're the ones who are continuing this jihad against the West, and they're the ones who are murdering us Iranians when we speak out and try to reclaim our country. So without further ado, let's get started. And if you're liking the stream, make sure that you like and subscribe, and share it with everyone you know, so we can get the truth out there.
During the night of January the 20th, 1981, 52 American diplomats arrive in Algiers from Tehran. They can finally breathe freely after being held hostage in Iran for a very long and difficult time.
Feeling great right now. Best I've felt in 444 days.
Thank God we're home.
The hostage crisis lasted 444 days, each one an ordeal filled with psychological torture and physical abuse. For the world's most powerful nation, it was 444 days of humiliation that ended with it having to cede to the demands dictated by an Iran in the midst of its own revolutionary uprising. Several decades of resentment towards the United States spurred the events that took place from November 1979 to January 1981. resentment that's still alive in Iran. The US Embassy, focal point of the hostage crisis, and now a museum named US Den of Espionage Museum, keeps hate towards America alive.
So that's actually not true. So that's one of the biggest pieces of propaganda that the Islamic Republic was able to get away with for a very long time. They managed to convince Americans that we Iranians hate America, and that is, the farthest thing from the truth. And I actually did an entire live stream on this. Let me just pull it up so I can show it to you guys very quickly. So it was, here we go. It was last week. Okay. Let me just pull this up here. Add. So last week I actually did a live stream called USA versus Iran. So make sure that you guys go and watch that, because that's going to show you what Iranians actually think about the United States. For the longest time, okay, for the longest time, um, many people, including those who made this documentary, assumed that all Iranians hated the United States. And the reason that they thought so is because when the Islamic Republic took control of Iran in 1979, they also controlled the media, because Iran is currently occupied by a totalitarian Islamic dictatorship. So everything that comes out of the TV, media, radio, whatever, is 100% controlled by the Islamic Republic, and so you never get the actual picture. The only thing you get is propaganda. So the Islamic Republic painted this image of Iranians hating the United States, right? And unfortunately, people believed that, even though, there are countless of images, photos, videos from the 1970s that show that Iran and the United States were very close allies. So again, it was the Islamic Republic that created this enmity. And because the Islamic Republic is a totalitarian dictatorship and has complete control of the news and the media, the rest of the world legitimately thought that Iranians hated the West, which is the farthest thing from the truth. And one of the reasons that the Islamic Republic wanted the rest of the world to think that way is because they didn't want to know that Iranians are under occupation. They didn't want to know that Iranians are being held against their will, at literal gunpoint, right? And so it's only been in recent years, I would say probably since about, 2012, 2015, with the rise of social media and, of course, the internet, that Iranians have been able to communicate with the outside world and to show the outside world what sort of, Islamic hellhole they have been trapped in since 1979. And there's a reason that social media is banned in occupied Iran, right? Iranians are not allowed to use social media. Those who do, who speak out against the Islamic Republic, are at risk of being murdered, which happens unfortunately very frequently. Any Iranian who speaks out against the Islamic Republic is executed. I'm actually going to speak about that tomorrow during my daily live stream about one of the most recent victims of the Islamic Republic. His name is Omid Sarnak. I'm going to be speaking about him tomorrow, so you want to make sure to tune in at 12 noon for that one. But so the Islamic Republic always painted this image, and so in this live stream here, okay, USA versus Iran, I go into detail about what Iranians actually think about the United States, and I provide images, I provide videos, I provide, documents, testimony, the whole thing. So you want to make sure to watch that. But all that to say, just this documentary that we're going to watch, just bear that in mind. Bear that in mind. Um, even the narrator of this documentary does not understand or make a distinction between Iranians and the Islamic Republic, because again, it's not Iranians. Iranians were fine with America. Iranians are still fine with America. We have no enmity, no issue towards them. It's the Islamic Republic itself. And when you look at older documentaries about Iran, you could see that close friendship between Iran and America. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind as we go through this documentary. That's just my one pet peeve with this. Oh, wait, sorry. I also see we have a starred comment. So, Major, I know that the whack jobs keep chanting like they won a great victory against a bunch of unarmed people whose few armed guards were told not to fight back. 100%, 100%. I mean, these are the same whack jobs who took Americans hostage. They were the same ones who were murdering Iranians in the streets who were fighting back. Like, these are the same whack jobs who were murdering Iranian politicians as well. So first they went after the Iranians. They went after people who supported the Shah, and then they came after the Americans. And many of these people are now unfortunately in power, and it's just a very, very horrific thing.
The embassy was seized on the morning of November the 4th, 1979. The operation was prepared by Islamic leaders in the universities in Tehran.
Did you guys hear that? Did you guys? So, to her credit, at least she does mention that the operation was basically created and organized by Islamic leaders, right? Right? Like, are you guys seeing the pattern here? So it wasn't Iranians that did this. It was the Islamic leaders. It was the clergy, the men of God, right? The people who claim that they speak on behalf of Allah. They were the ones who orchestrated the American hostage crisis.
Who incited 400 students to go storm the American embassy. Despite the revolutionary turbulence and
Wait, how many was that? I missed that.
Operation was prepared by Islamic leaders in the universities in Tehran, who incited 400 students to go storm the American embassy.
And see, like that's all it was. It was 400 students, right? So 400 Islamic students, right? Does that sound familiar to some of like the university encampments that you're seeing in the West, right? What's the common undercurrent here between these Islamist university students in Iran versus those in the United States, right? The common denominator is that Islamic ideology, right?
Despite the revolutionary turbulence and anti-American sentiment in the country, the embassy did not increase security. The Marines, who were ordered not to shoot, didn't resist for very long. The American diplomats who'd been controlling Iran for decades underestimated the siege, carried...
That was a weird thing to say. The American diplomats who had been controlling Iran for decades. That is that's very bizarre and completely untrue.
out by a group of 20-year-olds.
I thought that the adults in the room would act and realize this something like this is simply unacceptable. What happened was there were no adults in the room.
No, the adults in the room were encouraging this. The adults in the room were the Islamic jihadis who took over the country thanks to Jimmy Carter, and then they turned around and they stabbed you guys in the back.
Or even worse, the adults encouraged the children who were running amok.
Yeah.
I knew that we were in trouble when I heard 1 or 2 days after the embassy seizure that Khomeini had backed the students who had invaded our premises.
At the beginning of the hostage crisis, Iran had only recently come under the rule of an important religious dignitary, the Ayatollah Khomeini, who...
I can't believe they refer to him as an important religious dignitary. He was not an important religious dignitary. He was a savage Islamic pedophile who basically wanted to impose Sharia law and imposed Sharia law, and he hated everything about the West. Like he wanted to establish an Islamic caliphate, and he saw America as the enemy to doing so. Jesus Christ. I can't believe Jimmy Carter thought this guy would be good for Iran. Like, Jimmy Carter is an idiot. I hope he's rotting in hell.
Quickly donned the cloak of supreme leader of the nation. His followers called him Imam Khomeini. He came to power following the Iranian Revolution that overthrew the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza.
It wasn't the Iranian Revolution, it was the Islamic Revolution. I hate when people call it the Iranian Revolution because it had nothing to do with Iran.
Pahlavi. The Shah had ruled the country with an iron fist for nearly 40 years.
Okay, again, that's totally false. We've already established in previous documentaries that the Shah was not an authoritarian. He didn't rule Iran with an iron fist. In fact, he was a progressive. He was a modern. He gave women the right to vote in 1963, before women had the right to vote in countries like Sweden and Switzerland and Portugal. So again, like that narrative is the Islamic narrative. That's the communist narrative, right? Like she's literally promoting the narrative of the people who took the Americans hostage, right? Because they actually used that lie and propaganda about the Shah being an authoritarian in order to justify overthrowing him. But then by doing so, by overthrowing him, they actually did turn Iran into a legitimate Islamic dictatorship. Okay, prior to the 1979, Iran was relatively free and it was moving rapidly towards modernization. And the reason that the jihadis took over is because they did not like the fact that Iran was moving towards modernization. They did not like the fact that the Shah was giving women equal rights to men. So again, that's just false propaganda, false narrative. It's propaganda. How could the Shah be authoritarian when he's giving women the right to vote? And if Iran was actually under his authoritarian rule, why the hell would women get the right to vote anyway? Like, do you see the contradictions here in this narrative?
By the United States for political and security support. Crowds flocked to see Khomeini at each of his appearances, but he knew his power was fragile. He had to walk a fine line to please the people on all political sides who had brought him to power. The Islamists who were devoted to him, the pro-West liberals who supported him, but who wanted to limit his role to that of a moral.
It's wild to me that the pro-West liberals support him. Oh, by the way, guys, do you see this? Oh, look, I stopped at the perfect time. So there's also the communists, right? So when we talk about the Islamo-Marxists who support the Islamists, this is what we're talking about. Do you see that like communist sign there? That's from the Mujahideen Khalq, another Islamic Marxist terrorist group. So literally the people who claim that the Shah was a dictator are either Islamic terrorists or they're Marxist terrorists, right? Those are the ones who were accusing the Shah of being an authoritarian dictator, even though they're the ones who are the actual authoritarians and they're the ones who are the actual terrorists. So again, guys, these are the people who overthrew the Shah, the communists and the Islamists, right? We call this the unholy alliance of the red and the black.
Authority, the movements on the left which hoped to one day control the country. Khomeini decided to eliminate all political forces that stood in his way of securing absolute power.
Okay, so who's the authoritarian? The evil demon man who turned Iran into a 7th century Islamic hellhole governed by Sharia law, or the Shah who gave women the right to vote? Right? Like, do you see how messed up the narrative is when it comes to Iran, and how these non-Iranian documentaries try so desperately to like push and promote this revisionist narrative that just does not make sense and does not hold up to scrutiny?
Clever strategist, he asked the Islamist forces to carry out anti-American actions to get the people on his side. He didn't want to leave anti-American sentiment, which was the driving force in Iran, in the hands of the left, which was becoming more and more powerful.
Like, do you see? It's like so these are the people. These communists are the people who were accusing the Shah of being a dictator, right? It's the same as like these weird communists in the West today who are accusing elected officials of being dictators. It's the exact same thing.
After the siege, our only goal was
Guys, they're actually interviewing an Islamic terrorist. This is wild. This is wild. Like they're actually interviewing one of the Islamic jihadi terrorists who took Americans hostage, and they're treating him like he's some sort of normal human being and not like a savage Islamic terrorist. Like this is insane. See, this is a problem. Like Western media are normalizing these savage jihadis, right? This would be like this is the equivalent of I don't know, like casually interviewing a former Nazi during a documentary about the Holocaust, right? And then the Nazi is like living, in some Western country, free, right? Like no jail, no nothing. After World War II, Nazis were persecuted as they should. But yet, in the case of Iran, these Islamic terrorists literally are living freely in Western countries, and they're just now being casually interviewed. Let's casually interview this Islamic terrorist, right? He should be in jail, but instead he's being casually interviewed. Again, guys, this is like the equivalent of listening to a Nazi casually talk about, the Holocaust. Like that's how horrific this is to me as an Iranian.
to let the political leaders of the country know that we were not part of the Marxist left movements. We're people, militants, who have experience with struggles, the revolution, and we clearly and completely support Imam Khomeini.
So they're literally saying that they support the Islamists. He's one of them. He's literally an Islamic terrorist. And he's just talking about it so casually, right? Like this man is responsible for the blood of millions of Iranians, right? He's responsible for turning Iran into the brutal 7th century Islamic hellhole it is today. And yet I find it very interesting that he is living somewhere in the West, right? So he turned Iran into a 7th century Islamic hellhole, and yet he's living comfortably in some Western non-Islamic country. Unbelievable.
The resentment of Iranians toward the United States in particular was always there. What the revolution changed was now people were able to express this, something they had never done before. And all of these pent up, it was like a pot. The lid just blew off the pot.
The takeover of the embassy by his followers was the opportunity Khomeini had been hoping for so he could cement his power. He immediately backed the hostage takers and hailed their action as a second revolution, even bigger than the first, which had overthrown the Shah just a few months earlier.
What a psycho.
The massive rallying sparked by the takeover of the embassy positioned Khomeini as the only protector of the Iranian people, dispossessed for so long by the Americans. it was also a chance for him to get a bargaining chip, freeing the hostages in exchange for extraditing the Shah, who had been taken in by the United States. The former monarch had been in New York since late October, receiving treatment for cancer. Khomeini was worried. He feared the Americans would attempt a coup to restore the Shah to the throne.
I think there was no question that the Americans would return the Shah to Iran. We just weren't going to do that. He had collaborated with us over many years and made many sacrifices. So we owed him.
So at least this guy is admitting that prior to the Islamic takeover of Iran, America and Iran were allies, right? Like the Shah was an ally of the United States. Not Jimmy Carter, though. Jimmy Carter is an Islamist sellout.
A great deal.
President Carter, when he agreed to allow the Shah to come to the United States for medical treatment, he was reluctant, but he agreed. And he turned to his advisors and he said, "What are you going to advise me to do when our embassy is occupied and our people are taken hostage?"
As soon as Khomeini came to power, several embassies were hit with takeover attempts by revolutionary groups. On February the 14th, 1979, the American embassy itself was the target of an attack by Marxist militants.
See, again, like it's always the communists and the Marxists and the Islamists. Are you guys seeing the pattern here? Like the 1979 Islamic takeover was not normal Iranians. It was the Marxists and the communists and the Islamists, right? And they're the ones who are constantly out there attacking. And yet you guys are letting these communists and Islamists operate freely in your countries. Guys, do you think that like this happened overnight? No, this was the product of about 40 years worth, right? This was 2 generations in the making, from 1941 until 1979. So, I mean, what happened in Iran, guys, it didn't happen overnight. It took 40 years, and we're already starting to see the signs of, similar behavior in Western countries. So don't think it can't happen in your countries if you don't pay attention and wake up.
Khomeini militia quickly had them evacuated. This time, the Americans knew that the situation was different. Khomeini's own followers were occupying the embassy. Jimmy Carter, the American president, sensed that negotiations would be difficult. His national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, suggested there might be another option, a rescue mission that the military had been secretly evaluating. In Tehran, confusion reigned supreme in the streets and within governmental bodies. There was no government. A council of the Islamic Revolution, whose members were all named by Khomeini, was running the country. This body nominated Abul Hassan Banisadr as Minister of Foreign Affairs.
I went to see Mr. Khomeini, who told me, "We're going to keep the hostages for 3 or 4 days."
My gosh, I'm sure like this Islamic jihadi grifter probably made a fortune doing the documentary round, right? Because we also saw him, guys, in that other documentary, which we rated 3 out of 10 about the Islamic Republic, right? Jeez. And again, like living comfortably, in a Western country. So this guy helped turn Iran into the Islamic hellhole it is today. And now he's living, some affluent life in a Western country.
Long enough for America to realize it has committed crimes, and then we'll free them. So I agreed to become Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Two weeks after the takeover and the start of the hostage crisis, Khomeini sent a signal. He instructed his son, Ahmad Khomeini, to free a few hostages. His son decided to release 13 of them, just African Americans and women.
That's kind of weird. Like, so they basically released all the women and the black people, and then the white males had to stay. That's, I don't know, weird thinking there.
Although Banisadr was officially in charge of the fate of the hostages, his hands were tied. Khomeini forbade him from having any direct contact with the Americans. He and his advisor
that's kind of weird, right? Like, so you have this guy who's supposed to be the foreign affairs minister, and yet he can't even speak or negotiate with the Americans. Like these Islamic jihadis are just savages, right? Just wild.
Advisor Ahmed Salamatian appealed to the UN and requested a meeting of the Security Council. They hoped to obtain a fair and balanced decision, conviction of the United States for their interference under the reign of the Shah, and the release of the hostages.
I went to the United Nations with this mission to try to get the UN Security Council to meet to discuss the hostage situation. And the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Bani Sadir, would also be there in person, and we would come to an agreement. I was convinced that it was possible, that it was doable.
When I had to go to the UN Security Council meeting to solve the problem, Mr. Khomeini issued a statement saying, "No one will attend the UN Security Council meeting on Iran's behalf." So I resigned as Minister of Foreign Affairs.
That morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I read the news about the Minister of Foreign Affairs not coming. Let me tell you that up until the time that I got on the plane and left, I hid from the UN diplomats because I was ashamed.
Powerless, the Americans watched the days in captivity rack up as they awaited news from their fellow citizens trapped in Khomeini's grasp. The Iranians watched as authorities played a game of musical chairs. In late November 1979, a new foreign affairs minister was named, Sadegh Gobzadeh, an ambitious man who thought his close relationship with Khomeini would afford him some leeway to resolve the hostage crisis. Well aware that it was forbidden to speak with the Americans, he asked two friends, Christian Bourget, a French lawyer, and an Argentine businessman, to contact the American administration. From the outset, President Jimmy Carter gave the Iranians a promising sign. He asked the Shah to
Keep in mind, like Jimmy Carter is the one that brought these people in. Jimmy Carter endorsed the Ayatollah. Like that's how much of an idiot Jimmy Carter is. Like we hate Jimmy Carter. We love Richard Nixon, but Jimmy Carter, like he can rot in hell.
leave America and continue his treatment in Panama, a country under American control. On behalf of Iran, Christian Bourget, the lawyer, wanted to begin the extradition process. The Panamanian president was playing both sides. He told the Iranians that legal action was possible, and he ensured that the Shah was safe.
In his dealings with Khomeini, Gobzadeh always presented Khomeini with a done deal. Gobzadeh wasn't one to discuss taking action with Khomeini. Gobzadeh took action first, and then he packaged it up.
The United Nations was still looking for a way to resolve this international crisis with unforeseeable consequences. In agreement with the American president, the UN Secretary General traveled to Tehran in early January 1980. Kurt Waldheim hoped to meet with both the American hostages to make sure they were in good health and Khomeini to negotiate their release. Instead, he was met with an angry mob. Hundreds of Iranians unleashed their hatred of the Shah on him.
Not Iranians, Islamists. But I also find it interesting that they say hundreds of Iranians, right? In a city of millions of people, the fact that there was only hundreds should send a signal to you. Again, like the Islamic Revolution was not like a mass popular sort of revolution. It was by the communists and the Islamists, right? The rest of the people just sort of were the silent majority, and they never thought that they would actually gain control. By the time that the communists and Islamists gained control, it was too late, and then they had access to all the guns and everything. So again, think about that. think about the fact about what she said. You know, hundreds came out in a city of millions of people. Hundreds coming out is nothing.
The same Shah who was accused of committing torture and crimes with the help of the Americans.
So, okay, so now apparently, not only is the story that the Shah, you know, God rest his soul, committed torture and crimes, but the torture and crimes were actually helped by the Americans. So apparently now the Americans were also somehow torturing like Islamists, right? So do you see how these jihadis lie? They always lie about one thing or another. And so apparently, in order to justify taking innocent Americans hostage in 1979, they had to make up this fake lie that Americans were torturing Iranians, which is 100% the farthest thing from the truth, right? So again, pay attention. Like these jihadis, these Islamists, all they do is they just lie in order to justify their terrorist jihadi behavior, right? It's all part of taqiyya, right? It's all taqiyya. Again, like we've demonstrated in other documentaries, there's actually there's no proof or evidence of the Shah ever like torturing anyone. Um, it's all just like fake.
Kurt Waldheim left Tehran without meeting with Khomeini or the hostages. He later recounted that he was scared for his life.
Yeah, I mean, anyone would be scared for their lives going and, you know, being surrounded by a bunch of savage jihadis that are yelling at you like Allahu Akbar. Fuck, I would be scared too.
The UN was not giving up. It still attempted to be the mediator. Waldheim accepted Sadegh Gobzadeh's proposal to create a commission to mitigate the explosive situation in Tehran. Inside the UN, talks about who should be on the commission went on for several weeks. It was finally formed in February and arrived in Tehran on an official mission to investigate criminal interference by the Americans in Iran during the reign of the Shah.
But we went further than that. We had the tacit agreement of everyone, even the Iranians themselves. The Commission was looking for a way to free the hostages, and step by step really wanted to meet with hostages.
We thought that a visit like that of the members of the UN Commission could be a way to gather information that could later be used to harm the hostages and us students.
Mr. Khomeini made a statement saying that the UN Commission had to deliver its report before leaving Iran. The Commission came to see me, and they said, well, you know, following a statement like that, even though we want to issue a report, it would have zero validity.
The members of the commission refused to submit themselves to Khomeini's demand. They left Tehran without seeing the hostages or gaining the slightest glimmer of hope of freeing them. Their mission was a failure. It was now a glaring fact that the UN was powerless and could do nothing to resolve this international crisis.
Of course, because you can't negotiate with terrorists. I mean, I don't understand why these people think that they're dealing with rational, normal actors here. You're literally dealing with jihadis who are making up lies to justify taking hostages and murdering people.
While the UN was attempting mediation, secret talks between the Americans and the Iranians never...
Right? Like that's the one thing I want you guys to focus on. Like we're about we're 16 minutes into this documentary, and they've said that the you know, the Islamists took the Americans hostage, but they actually haven't provided a reason why, right? They still haven't said why the jihadis took Americans hostage. And that's because unless you understand how like Islamofascism works, unless you understand the mentality behind Sharia law, um, you're not going to get it. But if you understand Sharia law, if you understand Islamic extremism, if you understand how Islamic terrorism works, then you realize that the reason that they took Americans hostage is because America is in direct contradiction to Sharia law, and so the Islamists were basically doing that to impose their will um, over the Americans. Now, after the students took the Americans hostage, it was at that point that Khomeini, the leader of the Islamic Republic, decided to take advantage of the situation and try to use the hostages as a bargaining chip in order to convince Jimmy Carter to bring the Shah back to Iran and do like some sort of hostage exchange. Thankfully, the Shah and his family and his advisors were smart enough, and they basically left the United States before Jimmy Carter could agree to that, because I have a feeling Jimmy Carter probably would have agreed to that, because Jimmy Carter is a traitor and an evil man, and also an idiot. So after the American hostages were taken, the Islamists did try to use that as a bargaining chip, but luckily, thank God, the Shah and his family left Iran before that became left America before that became a possibility.
Stopped. They were led by the French lawyer Christian Bourquet. In mid-February, he set up a secret meeting in Paris with the Iranian Foreign Affairs Minister and President Carter's White House Chief of Staff. Hamilton Jordan arrived in the French capital under an alias and wearing a wig and moustache. As for Sadegh Gobzadeh, he was in France on official business. The two men met very discreetly for dinner at a hotel. Sadegh Gobzadeh began their one-to-one discussion by expressing his concern. If the communists in Iran find out about this meeting, I'll lose my job and possibly my head. He reassured Hamilton Jordan that the hostages were doing well and that he had a plan to get them released. He believed that the Iranian people's anger and the hostage-taking were due to the United States' domination over Iran for the past 30 years.
But what domination? There was no US domination over Iran. Again, that's like the Islamist jihadi narrative that the communists, right, the anti-imperialists were pushing.
The American replied that it was time to look forward to the future and stressed that President Carter was not an interventionist, despite pressure from numerous Americans who were calling for military action. Gobzadeh wanted new relations with the United States. Hamilton Jordan seized the opportunity to slide him a note about how Soviet troops were amassing along the Iranian borders and told him there was an imminent threat.
During this crisis, there was a major event that could have overshadowed the crisis itself, and that was the invasion of Afghanistan.
It was a question of whether this hostage-taking by the Iranians would lead to a major confrontation between the two superpowers. So, Mr. Jimmy Carter had more things to think about.
Soviet tanks had closed in on Iran. In late 1979, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan to come to the aid of an allied government threatened by an Islamist uprising, secretly backed by the Americans. In the midst of the Cold War, the White House feared a disaster scenario. The invasion of Tehran by the Soviets, who now had two routes to enter Iran, by the northern border.
Guys, so do you see this? This is what I was talking about. So in my other, in the other live streams where we go over other documentaries, so do you see the USSR? So when I say the USSR shared a border with Iran, this is what I'm referring to. So this is why the USSR had a lot of Russian influence within Iran. And that's why the communists had a lot of power in Iran, because the USSR was constantly trying to turn Iran into another proxy, and they were trying desperately to get Iran to fall, behind the Iron Curtain, just like, they had done with Afghanistan. Of course, the Shah was one of the main reasons why Iran did not become part of the USSR. That's why the communists were, so against the Shah, because the communists, the Tudeh party was actually created in Moscow, and all of these communists were funded by the Soviets, and their whole purpose for being there was to get rid of the Shah, take over Iran, and then have Iran join the USSR. So this is where that, heavy Marxist, socialist, communist influence comes from, guys.
On the eastern border, the CIA issued extremely alarming reports. They noted that Soviet troops had amassed at the Iranian borders and that the Iranian communists and the left had gained ground.
Why did the Iranian communists and Marxists and leftists gain ground? Because they were being funded by the Soviets. The 1979 Islamic Revolution was essentially funded by the Soviets. And Jimmy Carter was a useless idiot for the Russians because he thought that Khomeini would somehow not be a communist or support communism.
The Americans wondered whether dealing with Khomeini wouldn't be better than watching a communist government take over Tehran.
See, he just said it. Except for the fact that Khomeini and all of those Islamists were actually trained and funded by the Soviets as well, just like Yasser Arafat and the PLO were trained and funded by the Soviets.
Actually, one of our problems was that we had no insight into the workings of the Iranian government. We had no way of influencing their decisions. We were dealing very much alone against an unknown antagonist.
Yeah, antagonists that you guys brought in. You guys supported them over the Shah. Right? Like the documentary completely ignores the fact that it was Jimmy Carter's policies that brought in the Islamic Republic. So you're not getting the full picture here with this part, because they're making it seem as if they had nothing to do with the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Jimmy Carter played a big role in supporting the Islamists. So, I mean, this was a mistake of their own doing, basically. This was one of the biggest failures of the Carter administration.
Let me tell you that the most important element of the United States of America's policy regarding Iran was a lack of visibility. They had no idea of how to analyze the political situation inside Iran. It was beyond their control.
The extradition of the Shah that the Iranians were hoping for didn't happen. On March the 24th, 1980, the Shah left Panama to seek refuge in Egypt. His friend Anwar Sadat was in charge. Christian Bourguet was disappointed, but still hoped to negotiate a solution with the Americans. On the way to Tehran from Panama, the French lawyer stopped in Washington to meet with Hamilton Jordan, who had a surprise for him: a meeting with Jimmy Carter. Christian Bourguet was impressed. He wanted to show the American president the positive aspects of the situation. He thought the Shah's leaving Panama might satisfy the Iranians. If he was fleeing justice, it was because he'd committed crimes. Regarding the ongoing hostage negotiations, he tried to reassure Carter and told him progress was being made. Jimmy Carter replied angrily, "I don't see the slightest indication of progress. We're exactly where we were 4 months ago. The hostages are suffering every day. Our patience is starting to look like weakness. Something needs to change."
We had no reliable contacts. The people who would talk to us had no authority. The people who had authority wouldn't talk to us.
What was particularly impressive was how the entire collection of resolution strategies that they envisaged failed.
Iranians had been holding American citizens in captivity for 155 days. The situation was unbearable for many Americans, who expressed their exasperation with protests. The American president couldn't turn a deaf ear to the anger rumbling across the country, especially given that he was running for re-election in the upcoming presidential election that would take place in just a few months. On April the 7th, Jimmy Carter finally decided to make some serious decisions. While traveling aboard his presidential plane, Air Force One, he wrote down the measures that he planned to announce to the American people, including a total embargo in Iran and the end of all diplomatic relations. He also decided to step up preparations for a military operation. Jimmy Carter asked Hamilton Jordan, his chief of staff, to once again meet with Sadegh Gobzadeh, the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, to find out what the Iranians might know about the rescue mission that was in the planning stages. A second top-secret meeting was set up again in Paris. The Iranian minister did not agree with Carter's decisions to implement an embargo and sever diplomatic relations. He then warned Hamilton Jordan, "I hope your president won't do anything reckless, like attacking my country." The American replied that no such thing would happen. Gobzadeh didn't know that this meeting was part of an American disinformation campaign to make the Iranians think that they still preferred negotiations. Gobzadeh did not reassure Jordan on the fate of the hostages. He thought they'd continued to remain in captivity for months before being able to go home because the situation in Iran was very tense. There was no longer any hesitation about the rescue mission. On April the 20th, the countdown to the military operation began. Zbigniew Brzezinski, the US National Security Advisor, who'd recommended such action be taken at the beginning of the hostage crisis, saw his suggestion finally come to fruition. Operation Eagle Claw began off the coast of Iran during the night out over the Arabian Sea. To improve security, the Pentagon strategist had planned for the operation to last all weekend, which for the Iranians was Thursday, April the 24th, and Friday, April the 25th. 8 helicopters took off from the USS Nimitz, an aircraft carrier, and 6 C-130 Hercules jets took off from the American base on Masira Island. 120 men were aboard these aircraft, which flew at low altitude at night to a place dubbed Desert One in the Iranian desert, about 300 kilometers from Tehran. The operation also required helicopters that transported stormtroopers to a base closer to Tehran and trucks that took them to the occupied American embassy. The scenario didn't go as planned. Several accidents occurred while conducting the mission, including the fatal crash of a helicopter and a refueling jet at Desert One. Impossible to continue the operation. The order was given to abandon the mission. The Americans left behind 8 soldiers who perished in the fire.
President Carter tried a military operation, which was frankly very dangerous and very difficult. I don't know what would have been possible that would have kept all of us safe and got us out alive.
Not very many other people subscribed to that action because we had seen that the Iranians could be quite ruthless and would have no hesitancy in gunning down.
So again, he's not referring to like Iranians, they're referring to the Islamists, right? Like the jihadis who took over Iran in 1979. I wish they would make that distinction more, because they're making it sound as if like all Iranians are like that, where it's literally the farthest thing from the truth. Our country is under occupation by these Islamic savages that took over in 1979, along with the Soviet-funded communists, by the way, right? As this documentary correctly mentioned, the Islamists gained power with the control of Soviet money and the Soviet, backed communists in Iran.
Their enemies if they thought it served their interests.
The US Secretary of State, Cyrus Vance, who had always been opposed.
And guys, just I want to point out that difference here, because right now there are communists and Islamists in your countries who are slowly starting to take over, and so they are importing their jihadi Islamofascist ideology with them into your countries, right? So you have to understand the problem and you have to be able to identify the source of the problem if you want to fight it.
Opposed to any military action, resigned. A tough blow to Jimmy Carter, who lost an important member of his staff and a friend. Once the failed operation was no longer a secret, the American president asked all his advisors to let their Iranian contacts know that the United States had no intention of invading their country. His top concern was saving the lives of the hostages. The following day, he met with his military generals to debrief the mission. The meeting of April the 26th was an uncomfortable situation for President Carter. He was pushed to take military action by certain members of his staff, but he was forced to deal with its failure alone. He even got lectured by the military brass, who criticized his leadership. Disconcerted, Carter didn't discuss the criticism. No one wanted to dwell on the failure of the operation. The president steered the discussion to a new rescue mission. Once again, the discussions got out of hand. The craziest of options were brought up, including a large-scale invasion of Iran. Frustrated and weakened, the president ended the chaotic meeting. It was completely devoid of military introspection, and no decision was made on how to move forward.
No field analysis would have come with or given such a plan a probability rate of 1 in 1,000. A rescue operation in the heart of Tehran during a revolutionary uprising carried out by a few commandos and helicopters that would land in the desert a few hundred kilometers away.
At that point, there were hundreds, on average, 200 armed students at the embassy ready to defend the occupation at all costs. The embassy.
Do you see, like, that's all it was. It was 200 university students. That's it. That's all it took. It took 200 armed university students to hold Americans hostage for 444 days. So all these university students right now in America who are out there burning the flag of America and yelling like free Palestine and, globalize the Intifada, you have to take that threat seriously, guys, because it always starts with the university students. That's where they go to indoctrinate. That's where they go to promote, Islamic terrorism. That's exactly what they did in Iran, right? It was a mix of communism and Islamism. And now you're seeing the exact same thing in American universities, guys. Wake up, wake up. Like, what happened in Iran in 1979 could very well happen in your countries if you don't pay attention and you nip it in the bud.
Itself was very big. We didn't know where the hostages might be. They were absolutely not being held all together.
Khomeini's followers thought that the hand of God caused the operation to fail. Iran, which piously followed the principles of Islam, was protected.
Okay. The Islamic Republic overtook Iran in 1979. That's when, they started piously following Islam. Prior to 1979, Iran was a normal, secular, modern, Western country. And then it was these clerics who, overnight, when they gained control of Iran, took the country back 1,400 years to the 7th century and imposed Sharia law on everyone.
The Ayatollah Khalkhali, who carried out the regime's dirty work, had the charred bodies of the American soldiers put on display for the press. After this propaganda stunt, the bodies were handed over to the Swiss embassy, which represented American interests in Iran.
The Swiss.
Doesn't that remind you, like, guys, that's exactly what like Hamas terrorists did, where they were like, when they were like holding like that murdered baby parade, right? Like this is what Islamic terrorists do. They revel in hostage taking and murdering and then, showing corpses of murdered people, right? Like that's the 7th century Islamic savage, barbarity that these people have, whether it's, the Islamists in Iran or whether it's like Hamas in Gaza, right? It's the same mentality, it's the same behavior, it's the same ideology. Doesn't matter if it's 1979 or if it's 2025.
The embassy took possession of the bodies, which obviously had great significance for the Iranians. So it was a bit difficult to convince them that they nevertheless had to be taken away so they could be brought back to the United States.
Khomeini emerged strengthened by the failed military operation, but he still needed to share power. His former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bani Sadr, had been elected President of the Republic, winning a solid majority of 76% of votes. Although he was very popular, he struggled to exert his authority before Khomeini. He would have to wait a long time for the green light before forming his administration. He also had no power over the hostage takers, who only obeyed Khomeini. President Bani Sadr would not even be informed of the transfer of the Americans to various cities in the country, nor did he know where they were being held.
One night they came and said, pack up your things, whatever you have. We're moving you. And we're moving you a distance, not just from one room.
Yeah, you know what? This is a good point, Gandalf, that you make. I want to share this. So I usually share starred messages, but this is a really good point. So those Islamic clerics like Khalkhani and others, the ones who were parading the bodies of American soldiers, they're the same people who signed the execution of hundreds, if not thousands, of Iranian officers, pilots, ministers, university professors, right? So what they did to the Americans was like a tiny fraction of what was currently going on in occupied Iran with actual Iranians. Like these are bloodthirsty, evil demons, right? Yeah, like just horrible, horrible people. Literal Islamic terrorists.
To another, but it's going to be a long trip. So I ended up in Esfahan, in the city of Esfahan, about 7 hours south of Tehran.
We students sensed the hostages and ourselves might be in
Oh, again, look, the Nazi is speaking again.
real danger. So we immediately decided to split up and move the hostages to different regions in Iran. We did this to prevent any military interventions and terrorist and guerrilla operations.
Where is this guy, and why is he speaking so casually about the fact that he took all these American hostages? Like, should he not be in jail? Am I missing something here? Like, should he not be in jail? This is insane. Like, he's just casually speaking about how, he took Americans hostage as a university student, as if it's like the most normal thing in the world. But again, for these Islamic terrorists, hostage taking is normal. It's part of their, Islamic jihad.
They split them up and moved them to places all across Iranian soil. And no one knew where they were. The CIA was unable to locate the hostages, well, most of the hostages, right up until the end of the crisis.
The failed American military operation was an unexpected opportunity for Khomeini, who didn't want to come out a loser in the legislative elections, as he had done in the presidential election. The firm stance he took with the White House enabled him to appear to be the only one capable of getting the American superpower to give in. In early May, his supporters easily carried the vote in the first Majlis elections.
You realize, guys, like, for non-Iranians, like for us as Iranians watching this sort of footage, this is like watching like Nazi Germany, right? Like I feel like it's like the equivalent of, I don't know, watching like Hitler and his people, right? It's like, nightmare fuel.
The Parliament of the Islamic Republic. Bani
That's like
Sadr's
saying the
friends were now
parliament,
the minority.
like when they say the Parliament of the Islamic Republic, it's like saying the Parliament of Nazi Germany, right? Like that's the equivalent of basically what it is. It's like a whole bunch of like um Islamic terrorist war criminals.
And the entire left was eliminated.
Oh, there we go. There we go, guys. So this is important. So again, the communist leftist progressives who helped the Islamists get to power. Once the Islamists came to power, guess what they did? They eliminated all the lefties, including the communists, by the way, including the same savage communists who helped the Islamists get into power. They were eliminated too. Pay attention to this part.
To give in. In early May, his supporters easily carried the vote in the first Majlis elections, the Parliament of the Islamic Republic. Bani Sadr's friends were now the minority, and the entire left was eliminated.
For at least the first 8 or 9 months, we were useful.
I also find it wild that history has already shown what happens when the left supports Islamists, and yet it's today, 2025, and you still have the woke progressive left who are supporting the Islamic terrorists, not knowing that as soon as the Islamic terrorists get into power, they're going to go after the left and eliminate them, just like what happened in Iran in 1979.
To create hysteria and to mobilize support for the most extreme hardline factions in Iranian politics.
As a politician during the revolution, the Ayatollah Khomeini exploited and used the hostage crisis as a means to eliminate all his adversaries.
I mean, this guy's like another jihadi. Like he was an advisor to Beni-Sad. So it's like all these Islamists and communists are here being interviewed as if it's the most like normal thing ever, and they're just so casual about it too. Like this is horrifying.
And build
like
a power base
Nazi after
where
Nazi.
only he and his personal cabinet controlled everything.
In mid-May 1980, the elections in Iran were over, but the hostages were still locked up and had been rotting away for 200 days. In the United States, the presidential campaign was in full swing. Jimmy Carter tried to put on a happy face during his speeches as he campaigned for re-election, but he had no control over what was going on. His Western allies supported him half-heartedly. None of them wanted a confrontation with the Iranians. His longtime ally came to his rescue. The German Chancellor, Helmut Schmidt, wanted to help him find a way to negotiate. In agreement with Jimmy Carter, he reached out to the president of Algeria, Chadli Benjedid. During a meeting, he discreetly said, "It's up to you Algerians to help the world by preventing the conflict between Iran and the United States from getting worse."
The Germans, like the Swiss, not only informed us, but also asked that the United States really insisted that they agreed to Algerian mediation, because everyone saw that Algeria was, at that time, and in those circumstances, the country with the best chance of successfully freeing the hostages.
There are Muslims in Algeria. In the eyes of Imam Khomeini and Iranian revolutionary leaders, the Algerian war was held in high respect. No such trust existed with the Swiss, the Swedish, the UN, or the Germans, but with the Algerians, it did.
The Algerians were invited to.
The modern left in North America are the result of Yuri Bezmenov's explanation. They not only know nothing, but they don't want actual information. 100% Major. I have played, you actually recommended playing Yuri's 15-minute clip. So I did play that before. If we have time, maybe I'll actually play that again at the end of this documentary, because that, he does give a very, very good explanation of how the Soviets are infiltrating. And, he refers specifically to the United States, but, it's the same playbook in other countries. So what he's saying about the United States is 100% applicable to what they did in Iran as well. But no, that's an excellent comment, and I encourage everyone to look him up and look up his documentaries or look up his interviews on YouTube.
Help us out, and they refused. They said regularly when we approached them that it was not the right moment.
The diplomat with the best understanding of the Iranian situation was Algeria's ambassador in Tehran, Abdelkrim Heraib. He had long been in close privileged contact with Khomeini's entourage. He advised his Swiss counterpart, who had been representing American interests since the occupation of the embassy. If you want to successfully resolve the problems in Iran, forget about traditional diplomatic avenues. Algeria's ambassador knew that real negotiations wouldn't be possible until Khomeini had decided it was time. Khomeini was in no rush to negotiate. He wanted to throw his weight into the American presidential election and prevent Jimmy Carter from being re-elected. He had hated him with a passion since he...
That's so funny. So not only did Jimmy Carter back the Ayatollah and help the evil demonic Ayatollah get into power, but the Ayatollah is now repaying Jimmy Carter by not only taking American hostages, but now he wants to literally engage in American election interference to prevent Jimmy Carter from getting reelected. Like, do you see how these Islamists are, guys? Like, you cannot negotiate with them. You cannot work with them. You cannot do anything with them because they don't, they will never respect you, right? And the more you try to appease them, the more they will literally try to come after you. Let's play this part again, because
traditional
this is,
diplomatic avenues.
Like, and it's wild to me that Western politicians don't know this or don't understand this, or maybe they simply just don't care. Like, I think what happened to Iran in 1979 should be mandatory training for all Western politicians in order to understand how Islamic terrorists think. Because once you understand how they think, it's much easier to identify them in your own countries.
Algeria's ambassador knew that real negotiations wouldn't be possible until Khomeini had decided it was time. Khomeini was in no rush to negotiate. He wanted to throw his weight into the American presidential election and prevent Jimmy Carter from being re-elected. He had hated him with a passion since he had backed the Shah during the popular revolt.
What? Jimmy Carter did not back the Shah during the Islamic Revolution. That is a flat-out lie. That is 100% revisionist. I have no idea where that is coming from. That's the first time I'm hearing this. Jimmy Carter backed the Ayatollah. It is a well-known fact. I'm actually very confused by that statement that this documentary just made, because Jimmy Carter supported the Ayatollah. I mean, I can only imagine that the documentary is saying this because maybe they're trying to find some way to justify why the Ayatollahs stabbed Jimmy Carter in the back. But again, like, unless you understand how these Islamic jihadis think, you're not gonna understand why they do certain things. So you cannot assume that they are rational, logical actors. So they're probably just, maybe they think Jimmy Carter backed the Shah, but that's literally I mean, it's well-known, common knowledge. It is an established fact that Jimmy Carter backed the Ayatollah. Even Richard Nixon speaks about that, right? Like, everyone knows that. So this documentary is engaging in revisionism, and that is an incredibly bold statement to make with no facts to back it up. That is incredibly bizarre. So that like that, that's not an insignificant fact, guys. That is a um, major fact that they are saying completely wrong. It's the complete opposite.
Like a puppet master manipulating his primary players, this time Khomeini called upon the newly elected parliamentary representatives to take charge of the hostage affair. He wanted to drag out this crisis because Parliament was already bogged down with clan wars and unending procedures.
In my own case, being a representative, they took 3 months to give me my credentials because I was accused of complicity with the United States. At that point, I can tell you that the pro-American Western vermin label was getting stuck on anyone and everyone in power that they wanted to eliminate. Imam Khomeini considered our action as ultimately an action carried out by the people. And so it was up to the representatives of the people to decide how to end this affair.
Freeing the hostages was still not on the agenda in Parliament. Talks about forming an administration would last several months. After unending face-offs between Khomeini supporters and those backing President Banisadr, a government administration was finally named in late August of 1980. And in its top position was Mohammad Ali Rajai, an opponent of Banisadr. The president was thus removed from all important affairs. Sadegh Gobzadeh, the man who'd been secretly negotiating with the Americans, was not a member of the new government. He had lost the support of his mentor, Khomeini. Following a long fall from grace, he would be accused of plotting a coup d'etat and executed. While Iranian authorities fought their battles amongst themselves for months on end, the American hostages were still being held in captivity.
I mean, I would say that I would feel bad for these people being executed, but I have zero sympathy. I have zero sympathy for the fact that they were literally murdering each other. It's just basically terrorist infighting, right? So, guys, like, don't assume that there's a good side and a bad side here, right? Like, everyone you see who's involved in the American hostage crisis, they're all bad, right? The only good side was the Shah, who, is out of the picture right now because this is, referring specifically to the 1979, 1980 hostage crisis, right? So every single person that they're talking about here, all of these Islamic jihadis, they're all bad. So, I mean, just because one of them was like executed, whatever, like he had it coming, they're all horrible people. Like this is literally like watching like Nazis infighting, right? Like infighting between Nazis. So
in undisclosed locations.
The destiny of the presidency of the Republic, of Parliament, and of the future regime was taken hostage. The solution came when the President of the Republic had already been relegated to ceremonial flower boy.
Khomeini eliminated all the obstacles before him. The theocratic regime he now led was firmly in place. He had gained complete control of Parliament and the government. The threat of the Shah...
Did you hear that? So he gained complete control. Where was it? Okay. He had gained complete control of the government and the parliament. So again, everything that they accused the Shah of, right? Like they claimed the Shah was like a dictator or whatever. He was actually a modern progressive who was modernizing a secular Iran, and the Shah gave women the right to vote. It was everything they accused him of, they are guilty of, right? Because it was them, like it was this evil demonic man who turned Iran into a 7th century Islamic dictatorship, right? They just said he gained control of everything, right? And he imposed Sharia law on everything. So like these evil demons lied their way into power by creating a false narrative against the Shah of Iran with absolutely nothing to back it up, and yet they are the ones who are the evil, demonic savages.
Khomeini eliminated all the obstacles before him.
Right, like he eliminated everyone who said no to him, right? So there you go, all the communists, leftists, whoever, progressives, gone. All the anti-imperialists, right? Like the woke left that supported this evil man, all of them eliminated, all of them gone, and then he consolidated power like the savage 7th century authoritarian Islamic dictator that he is.
The theocratic regime he now led was firmly in place. He had gained complete control of parliament and the government. The threat of the Shah returning to power was finally laid to rest once and for all when Mohammad Reza Pahlavi died on July the 27th in a hospital in Cairo following his battle with cancer. Khomeini had exploited the hostage crisis as much as he possibly could, but he didn't want to release the hostages without getting something in return from the Americans. While Parliament was squabbling over the fate of the hostages, he authorized a member of his family, Sadegh Tabatabai, to contact the Americans and let them know he was finally ready to negotiate.
With intermediary help from German diplomacy, Sadegh Tabatabai succeeded in establishing indirect but nonetheless concrete contact between the Khomeini regime and the Americans. And they came to a conclusion. Mr. Khomeini must make certain statements so that the Americans can be sure that Sadegh Tabatabai is truly representing Khomeini's wishes.
In the middle of a message to pilgrims starting their pilgrimage to Mecca in a newspaper on September the 13th, 1980, Khomeini slips in the demands he wants to impose on the White House. Return the Shah's assets to Iran, lift the sanctions on Iran, guarantee no political or military interventions, and lastly, unfreeze Iranian assets held by the United States. Jimmy Carter finally knows he can negotiate on the basis of these 4 demands. He sends his Deputy Secretary of State, Warren Christopher, to Germany to meet with the Chancellor, Helmut Schmidt. The Germans set up 2 meetings for the American with Khomeini's emissary, Sadegh Tabatabai, on the 16th and 18th of September, outside of Bonn. The initial discussions seemed promising, but the 2 men wouldn't meet again. On September the 22nd, Saddam Hussein's Iraq invades Iran. The war put an end.
And what they don't mention is that guess who joined the Iraqis when Saddam started the war against Iran? The Palestinians, right? The Palestinians decided to join the Iraqi army because they're literally the mercenaries of the Middle East. They go wherever there is war and violence and conflict and jihad. I hold absolutely no ill will against the Iraqis for the Iran-Iraq war. Stuff like this happens. And, you know, when you're a soldier, and the leader of your country declares war, you go to war, right? The Iraqi army had no choice. But where I do hold ill will and where I do take it personally is with the Palestinians, because the fake Palestinians and their fake Palestinian flag, they had absolutely zero reason to go to Iraq and join the Iraqi army. But because they're a bunch of literally savage jihadi Islamic terrorists, right? They're known as the mercenaries of the Middle East. So they saw an opportunity to murder Iranians. So they went and they joined the Iraqi army and murdered Iranians. So, but no one ever talks about that fact, right? No one ever talks about the mercenaries of the Middle East. And then these are the same jihadi savages who expect the rest of us to feel for them and have sympathy for their fake Palestinian cause and their fake country.
Into all contact between the White House and Khomeini's entourage. The Iranians weren't gullible. They knew the Iraqi dictator had received the green light from the United States to start a bloody war. The Iraqis wanted to annex territories, and the Americans hoped it would result in a weakened Khomeini-run Iran.
It was immediately seen as a way to quickly resolve the crisis with a simple postulate. Under attack from the exterior, the Iranians would have to abandon the conflict with the Americans, from which they'd already exploited all possible beneficial aspects.
In the United States, November the 4th, 1980, marked 1 year to the day that the hostages had been held captive in Iran. But this anniversary was overshadowed by another event. The Republican Ronald Reagan had been elected president, and that was the top story on news stations all across America. In less than 3 months, he'd take over in the White House, ending the Democrat Carter's presidency. While Khomeini was pleased with Carter's defeat, Reagan's election was not without danger for him. During his election campaign, Reagan had mentioned military action against Iran. The master timekeeper knew he had little time left to settle the hostage affair. Algeria was finally called in to lead the negotiations with the Americans.
The Islamic Republic had no alternative. The Iranian authorities knew that Reagan wasn't like...
This guy's another, like, Islamist, right? Right? Like, he's, you know, the fact that he's, like, a professor at the University of Tehran, the guy's literally, like, an Islamist. So he's a Nazi. He's a Nazi. He's one of the bad guys.
Carter. Republicans weren't like Democrats. They knew that Reagan wouldn't take a seat at the negotiation table.
Therefore, they were afraid that once he was in office, he would launch an attack on Iran.
Day after day, the eyes of the American people were fixated on the number of days their fellow citizens had been held in captivity. On day 372, finally, a glimmer of hope that they'd soon be released reappeared. In early November 1980, the long-awaited negotiations got underway in Algiers. The Algerians took on the role of intermediary in what would become a long marathon of talks and bargaining, of compromises and coercion. In the Algerian capital, Warren Christopher and his advisors settle in, ready to try to hammer out an agreement, and intent on staying there until Jimmy Carter's last day in office. The Algerian negotiators, led by Mohammed Ben Yahia, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, quickly established a method of working. They would have 2 sets of discussions, one for discussions related to the political agreement, and one for the more complex discussions related to the assets belonging to the Shah and Iran that Iran wanted back. Since the Iranians still wouldn't speak directly with the Americans, the Algerian diplomats traveled back and forth between Algiers and Tehran to inform each side of the other's position.
The Algerian negotiators would come to Iran, listen to our demands.
Another Nazi, right? Another Nazi. And I don't understand how these people are just casually speaking in this interview as if they're like normal people and not like savage Islamic terrorists. It blows my mind.
And negotiate with us. They would also explain the demands of the Americans and convey our suggestions and proposals to Algiers. And there they would negotiate with Warren Christopher and the American team based in Algiers.
Algeria wasn't just a simple mailman whose job was to deliver Iran's position to the United States and vice versa. It was an active player that would invent solutions of its own for both parties, who would either accept them or discuss them, and so on.
I think the first sign that something positive was happening was around Christmas time of 1980, when we were visited by 2 or 3 Algerian diplomats. So I told...
Yeah, you know, Gandalf, you make a really good point. It seems as if, like, the Islamic regime, like wanted this documentary to be made because so far, um, the only justification they've given for the Islamists taking Americans hostage is that the Americans were somehow involved in torturing Iranians, which is completely false, right? Like it's just 100% untrue. And yet, we're 44 minutes in. We have about 11 more minutes to go in this documentary, and they still have not explained the logic or reasoning behind why these Islamist students and these communist students took Americans hostage, and why the Islamic Republic was supporting this behavior. They've just like conveniently glossed over that fact. And if anything, they're almost making it sound as if like the Americans deserve this, which is the farthest thing from the truth. So I mean, this is a I'd be interested in knowing who funded this documentary, because the they're making it seem as if like America are the terrorists, but in fact it's the Islamic Republic that's the terrorist, right? So it's a weird narrative. It's the facts are mostly correct, except for the part where they said Jimmy Carter backed the Shah, which is 100% false. Um, the facts are mostly correct, but it's the sort of the opinions, the editorial that's weird, the editorial that makes it incredibly bizarre here.
Myself, this is serious now. Something is going on.
The fate of the hostages was hanging in the balance simultaneously in Algiers, Tehran, and Washington. The Algerian capital had become the hub through which both parties' proposals and counter-proposals transited. Both the Iranians and the Americans wanted to move quickly. The political agreement was quickly reached. The United States promised in writing to respect a policy of non-intervention in the Islamic Republic. The US also guaranteed that no hostage would seek compensation from Iran for the long months of captivity. Negotiating the financial agreement, however, didn't go as smoothly. President Carter signed a decree that froze the Shah's assets, but he couldn't guarantee that funds held by private banks would be sent back to Iran. The Iranian negotiators used coercion to show their people that they were standing up to the American adversary.
هیچ مسئله گروگان‌ها برای ما نیستن، چه موندنشون چه رفتنشون. اگه آمریکا خواست شرایط مجلس شورای اسلامی ایران رو اجرا کنه، گروگان‌ها رو برمی‌داره میبره. اگر نخواست بازم برای ما مسئله نیست.
Despite this threat, the Iranian negotiators knew that Khomeini wanted an agreement to be reached, whatever the cost. On January the 14th, 6 days before Carter's term in office ended, along with the negotiations, Iran finally agreed to eventually take legal action in the courts to attempt to get back the Shah's assets. The two parties themselves would have to rely on an international tribunal to settle their numerous trade-related grievances. The Iranians and the Americans still couldn't agree on how Iran's assets and debts should be evaluated.
Clearly, Algeria had rather privileged relations with Iran, but it was a good opportunity to take advantage of that, to get Iran to give in.
It's quite possible that the Algerians wanted the crisis to end without their further involvement in it, and they supported what they considered to be a balanced approach to the negotiations.
The Algerian government fully executed its role as mediator and never pressured the Iranian government. If there was any pressure, it was inside the country. I remember during the negotiations, I'd get 2 or 3 phone calls a week from Ahmad Khomeini, Imam Khomeini's son, asking me on behalf of his father how the negotiations were progressing. He was very worried.
Jimmy Carter and his team were also worried. They saw the hours ticking by and they still hadn't reached a financial agreement. From Algiers, Warren Christopher kept the president abreast of every little bit of progress being made in this last negotiation. The American administration contested the sums Iran was demanding. Before the fall of the Shah, the two countries had signed numerous civil and military contracts together. Some of them were paid up front, before they were even fulfilled. The Iranians wanted their money back. The Americans started calculating how much debt Iran had racked up, which explained the financial imbroglio driving the American president and his team. Carter was exhausted. He hadn't slept in several days. He was following the negotiations minute by minute, despite the...
Carter was also out of his depth because he was an idiotic peanut farmer who did not have any understanding of what he actually did by supporting the Ayatollah over the Shah.
Time differences between Tehran, Algiers, and Washington. In Tehran, yet another crisis at the highest level of Iranian authority caused confusion. Although President Banisadr had been removed from the negotiation process by Khomeini, he attempted to thwart an agreement. He disagreed with the concessions made to the Americans. Algeria proposed freezing funds for future arbitration. On January the 19th, the day before Carter's term in office came to an end, the Iranians finally agreed with the amount of nearly $8 billion, which had to be deposited into an account managed by Algeria at the Bank of England to cover arbitration at a later date.
Harold, the money is in the bank and the president's getting on now.
Hi, Bill. Hi, Bill. What's hold up? Why the hell not? It's getting dark. Yeah, in Algiers, I talked to Chris about a half hour ago, and he said that they were checking off each portion of money as it came in and comparing it with the list. And, but then he told me then that in 15 minutes they should have the certification. So it's 15 minutes late.
On January the 20th, at about 7:30 in the morning, Washington time, London and then Algiers certified the total amount deposited by the American banks. The Algerian negotiators immediately informed the Iranians.
We hear that the hostages are in the air.
Tehran also had to sign off on the agreement to freeze the amount of nearly $8 billion. President Carter's nightmare was still not over. The Iranians were taking their time to sign. Having failed to secure the release of the hostages during his presidency, he attended the inauguration of his successor.
Of the United States. So help you God. So help me God.
At 12:05 p.m., Washington time, Nabavi signed the agreement. Why? Because at that precise moment, they were on neutral ground between an outgoing president they hated and wanted to slap one last time.
The Islamic Republic was never on neutral ground with America. They literally, one of the pillars of the Islamic Republic was calling America the Great Satan, regardless of who was in power. So that's a very, very uneducated and uninformed perspective on the Islamic Republic's foreign policy with respect to America.
And an incoming president they didn't want to have to deal with.
Completely wrong.
When at last the 52 Americans were about to be released, one last ordeal awaited them at the airport in Tehran before they could board the Air Algeria plane that had been parked on the runway for over 24 hours.
I heard noise, screams, insults that I could barely understand in Farsi, aimed at the people being brought to the plane.
I wasn't afraid so much as I was just sad. The actions of this group were so clumsy and so inept.
They entered the plane, clearly in shock, clearly disoriented. At the same time, they understood they were finally free.
Being on that plane, unless something unexpected was going to happen, we were out of there. What to change that one? Remember, of the 14 months that I was in captivity in Tehran, nine of those months, I was in solitary confinement.
I once again explained who I was to those who didn't know me, because the Swiss diplomats were asked to acknowledge the delivery of merchandise whose, let's not say contents, but rather whose identity was unknown. So I got the idea to ask the flight attendant for a piece of paper, and I wrote down the numbers from 1 to 52, because the agreement was to release 52 hostages.
52 former hostages who had to write down their names on a makeshift list. The Swiss diplomat methodically made his way through the plane, going from row to row to get the name of each freed hostage. He had to make a list that would be sent to the White House as proof that all the Americans had been freed. When Flavio Moroni got to the back of the plane, he realized there was a problem. Line 52 was empty.
I'm missing one person. What do we do? I wasn't ready to ignore the issue. Finally, looking at the list, I noticed a hostage had signed below line 40 instead of on line 41. That hostage became 40 bis, and the plane was able to take off.
The plane carrying the 52 Americans left the runway at Tehran airport about 30 minutes after Ronald Reagan was sworn in. Destination, Algiers. During the flight, the former hostages were both joyful and tense. Only when the flight crew announced that they'd left Iranian airspace were they truly overjoyed. When they arrived in Algiers, the Americans willingly took part in an official welcome ceremony that Mohammed Ben Yahya, the Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Warren Christopher, US Deputy Secretary of State, had organized. They then flew to Germany for medical examinations, and then finally on to the United States. In New York, a huge crowd cheered them on like heroes. They went up Broadway with their families, forgetting for a moment their ordeal in Iran. Some of them would live from now on with scars from the psychological torture they'd endured. Others would try as best as possible to move on from those 444 days that made a mark on their life and their country. The United States has not forgotten the humiliation they were subjected to. A lasting trauma settled in with the Americans, who realized their country was vulnerable. As for the Iranians, they continue to suffer from the cult of the power struggle with America that the current regime insistently glorifies to justify its existence. This late 20th century crisis marked the beginning of a shake-up in the political balance of power in the Middle East.
Okay, so my major concerns with this documentary is that they completely gloss over the reason why the Americans were taken hostage in the first place. Again, unless you understand the Islamic jihadi mindset, you cannot fully grasp the reasoning behind why they behaved the way they did. So it was 400 university students who were, as you know, the documentary said right in the beginning, they were encouraged by their Islamic leaders in the universities, right? So these Islamic leaders in the universities were indoctrinating the young students, you know, a mix of communists and Islamists. The communists, of course, were funded by the Soviets, as you know, the documentary sort of touched upon, but not really. Um, they took the U.S. embassy hostage because of their anti-imperialist ideologies, right? That's where you see the unholy alliance of the left and the Islamists uniting, right? The left being the red, the Islamists being the black. Um, and, you know, that's similar to the ideology and the narrative we're seeing in the United States today, where you have American university students who have been so indoctrinated, where they're literally burning American flags and yelling, you know, globalize the Intifada, free Palestine, all that nonsense. So it's that same radical jihadi Islamofascist ideology that ruined Iran in 1979 you're now seeing in the United States. So they never talk about that, right? They just kind of go into, you know, after the Islamic Revolution, one day, you know, the Islamic clerics decided, let's take the Americans hostage, right? So they kind of mention that, but they never go into the reasoning why. And then it almost seems like they're trying to blame Americans for the fact that they were taken hostage, which is very weird. And again, you know, they focused a lot on like the Iranians, but it was never the Iranians. All the people in this documentary are the same ones who have taken Iran and Iranians hostage, and they have been murdering us in the name of Allah and Islam and Muhammad for the last 47 years. So, you know, as an Iranian watching this documentary, the Iranians that they interviewed, that's like the equivalent of like, you know, interviewing Nazis to talk about the Holocaust, right? It's like you're interviewing Nazis to explain the Holocaust and, you know, try to downplay why they did what they did. It's very, very bizarre that way. Um, the part where they just blatantly said that Jimmy Carter backed the Shah, that's 100% false. That is like a huge, huge lie. That is a very big red flag to me. So I'm seeing a lot of you in the comments. You're saying like 2 out of 10, 1.5. I mean, I was actually thinking somewhat higher. I was thinking maybe like a 3 or a 4 because I would say that like maybe 9 like 75% of it is factually accurate and then there's 25% that is not factually accurate. Um, the fact that they don't mention Jimmy Carter being at fault is a big deal. So I'm guessing maybe you're right. Maybe it is like a 2 or a 1.5 because um yeah, like that it's like interviewing Himmler and Goring while they're free and in power. Yeah, that's 100% that's what it's like, right? Um yeah, and like like the fact that they mentioned Carter backing the Shah, like it's wild. So um yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe it is a 1.5. 1.5. I mean maybe a 2. I mean I'm thinking a 2 just because it is about 75% factually correct. But the editorialization of it, right? Like the opinions that they add afterwards or on top, um not accurate. They also, of course, demonize the Shah of Iran, so that's a huge red flag. And they just like throw out that Islamist communist propaganda about the Shah without any sort of proof to back it up. And you know, again, like for us as Iranians, this is why we never watch documentaries about Iran in English, especially like you know Iran after the Islamic Revolution, because it's just so full of disinformation, and they just casually blurt out the same like um Islamist and communist talking points, right? It doesn't matter which documentary. The Shah was a dictator, oh, he was an authoritarian, right? Like they just casually throw out these unfounded statements, and yet the documentary is literally about how the Islamic terrorists consolidated power and turned Iran into an actual authoritarian dictatorship. So it's just one contradiction after another. So yeah, I'm thinking. I guess a 2 out of 10, guys. Do you guys agree? Like a 2 out of 10 here, a 2 out of 10, or maybe a 3. But you know what? For me, like the one thing that I don't like about this documentary at all is when they said Jimmy Carter backed the Shah. Like that is just so glaringly false, um, that it makes me question everything else they say in this documentary. So yeah, okay, I think we're gonna go with a 2. We're gonna go with a 2 for this one. Um, so yeah, there you go. Um, Major, you think it's a 1 out of 10? All right, guys. I'm gonna ask you guys in the chat again. All right, between a 1 and a 2, where do you guys see this? Where do you guys see this? Give me your thoughts. 2 or 1? Um, yeah, it's tough. 1. Omid. Yeah, they definitely did interview monsters. 2 out of 10. 1, 1.5. Okay. All right. I'm seeing a lot more ones. Okay, all right, guys. We will give this one a 1 out of 10, a rating of 1 out of 10. Um, yeah, there you go. So again, another documentary watch party. I want to thank everyone for joining. I want to thank especially the Iranians in the chat who helped me by giving your thoughts and feedback and criticism on this, because it is you guys who make the viewing experience much more interesting for non-Iranians, and it also gives non-Iranians an opportunity to hear from us, people who've lived through this or experienced it, or have a different perspective. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and yeah, I will see you all tomorrow at 12 noon for the usual my usual daily live stream. We're going to be talking about why Iranians are currently burning the image of the Ayatollah. Um, just a few days ago, the Islamic Republic murdered another young Iranian, this time an Iranian man named Omid Sarlak. He was brutally murdered by the Islamic Republic. Um, and and I'm going to make the case tomorrow, guys, that he wasn't necessarily murdered because he burned the image of Khamenei. Khamenei is the supreme dictator. He was murdered because like Omid Sarlak was murdered by the Islamic Republic because he was a staunch supporter of the Shah, and he was an Iranian monarchist who was advocating for the return of the Shah. And the Shah in exile right now is the biggest threat to the Islamic Republic occupying Iran. And so I believe that they murdered him because of the fact that he was an Iranian monarchist. And I'm going to dive into that tomorrow because there's a lot to unpack there. So thank you everyone for joining. If you liked this live stream, make sure that you like, subscribe to my channel, share it with everyone you know, and also make sure to check out the other videos on the playlist, because what I do is every night I watch a documentary relating to Iran, whether it's the Islamic Republic or something else, and we do a watch party, and I provide my thoughts and feedback. And I'm glad that you guys are enjoying this. So thanks again, everyone, and Until I see you next time, پاینده ایران and جاوید شاه.